All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the pre-annual town meeting. My name is Gil Aligi. I am the chairman of the Finance Committee. Our moderator is traveling tonight, so I'll be covering for him. Let me introduce the other members of the Finance Committee. To my right, Maria Gomes, Jim Halleck, Linda DeMello, Joe Bickle, Ted Sargent. And I want to thank all the department heads that have worked with us to get to the budget that we have this year. I'll try to follow the format that John does when he's doing the pre-ATM. The original notice is to either the constables of the town of Raynham and the county of Bristol, greeting in the name of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. You are hereby directed to notify and warn the inhabitants of said town qualified to vote in elections and in town affairs to meet at the Raynham Middle School, Joseph A. Betancourt Auditorium in Raynham on Monday, the 15th of May at 7 o'clock in the evening, then and there to act on the following articles. So there's, I believe there are 28 articles we ended up with. And then the budget is in the back of the town warrant. So what I'll do is just briefly go over each of the articles, and if anyone has a question, you can stop me at the end and we'll have a slight discussion. So Article 1 is to just choose by nomination all the minor town officers, fence viewers, field drivers, surveyors, measure of wood, or take any action thereto. Article 2 is to accept the report of the town officers or take any action thereto. Article 3 is the overall town budget, which is found at the back of the warrant. And I will not go through and read every line item, but at the end, if someone has a particular question about one of the items, we can bring it up for discussion. So Article 4 is to vote to raise and appropriate or transfer a sum of $400 for the American Legion or take any action relative thereto. Article 5 is to authorize the town treasurer with approval of selectmen to borrow money from time to time in anticipation of revenue for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2017 in accordance with the Mass General laws. Any action thereto? Okay. Article 6, to authorize the Board of Selectmen to sign contracts on behalf of the town upon such terms and conditions as they deem appropriate for any matter which requires a signed contract by the board or take any action relative thereto. Okay. Article 7, to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept and enter into contracts for the expenditure of any funds allotted or to be allotted by the Commonwealth or the county for construction, reconstruction, improvements of town infrastructure, and to authorize the board to borrow in anticipation of reimbursement of funds or take any action relative thereto. Okay. Article 8, authorize an off-seat receipts account under the Mass General laws to fund operation of the before and after-school daycare run by the Park and Recreation Department, and to authorize expenditures of $218,500 for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, and the details are listed there. The off-seat receipts account is to be credited with all fees and charges received during fiscal year 18 from persons using these services. Any questions on that one? Article 9, to reauthorize a revolving fund pursuant to the Mass General laws for the purpose of receiving and expending funds for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2017, as a result of reimbursable incidents allowed under the Mass General laws involving hazardous material releases. Receipts generated shall be deposited directly into the revolving fund, and expenditures not to exceed $100,000 may be expended by the fire chief without further appropriation or take any action relative thereto. Good. Article 10, to reauthorize the fire alarm revolving fund under the Mass General laws for the purpose of receiving and expending funds for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2017. Receipts generated from fire alarm permits, inspections, and details shall be deposited into this revolving fund, and expenditures including but not limited to vehicle maintenance, detail pay, overtime coverage for replacement of fire inspector, and all equipment related to radio-controlled boxes not to exceed $60,000, which may be expended by the fire chief without further appropriation or take any action relative thereto. Article 11, to reauthorize the Council on Aging Activities Revolving Fund under the Mass General Laws for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2017. The revolving fund is to be credited with all funds and charges received in association with programs and activities of which a user fee is charged. Said receipts shall be deposited into this revolving fund, and expenditures not to exceed $20,000 may be expended by the Council on Aging without further appropriation or take any action relative thereto. Good. Article 12, to transfer $338,084 as detailed below from the ambulance receipts reserved account to operate the ambulance service for the first half of fiscal year 2018. Any unused funds at the end of fiscal 18 will be returned to the ambulance receipts account or take any action relative thereto. And you can see the details for personnel expenses and expenses. All set? Article 13, to appropriate the sum of $2,503,119 to be raised from sewer enterprise revenues for the operation and maintenance of the sewer department in fiscal year 2018 as categorized below or take any action relative thereto. And there's a note there, the Finance Committee recommends that the following sums be appropriated to operate the sewer enterprise. You can see the details leading to the total of $2,503,119. Any questions? Great. Article 14, to appropriate the sum of $628,918 from sewer retained earnings as categorized below or take any action relative thereto. And you can see the amounts taken from the sewer maintenance facility debt and the sewer construction debt. Good. Article 15, to appropriate the sum of $1,272,290 for the purpose of paying the debt service on the outstanding bonds and notes for the Raynham Middle School, the renovation projects for the Liberty Elementary School and the Merrill School, and for the Regional High School, or take any action relative thereto. Article 16, to appropriate the sum of $100,000 for the purpose of providing professional services, stormwater management expenses, land acquisition, materials, and construction contract obligations in order to make improvements to the town infrastructure, or take any action relative thereto. Article 17, appropriate the sum of $60,000 for the sewer betterment fund, or take any action relative thereto. And I just want to point out, this is the 5th installment out of 10 installments. Article 18, to transfer from the bond premiums account the sum of $13,656 for the payment of fiscal year 18 debt service as described below, or take any action relative thereto. And you can see that the sewer debt is split 75% from the general fund and 25% from the sewer fund. These funds are amortized over the life of the $9 million Phase 6 sewer borrowing to be used to offset both the excluded and non-excluded portion of the borrowing.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I'd like to point out in Article 17, this $60,000 per year for 10 years, it'll actually exceed 10 years by about 2 because the interest is being accrued on this debt, so that it's $60,000. Originally, we picked 10 installments of 60 because I think it was a shortfall of 579,000 originally. We figured that 10 years at 60 would do it, but actually, you yourself ran a schedule that showed when we apply the interest to that, which we should, it's going to exceed 10, but
Okay.
it's basically 60,000 a year for 10 or 12 years, I think.
Okay. Thanks, Dwayne. So Article 19, appropriate the sum of $30,000 to carry out state-mandated recertification interim adjustments of all real and personal property valuations and maintenance services for fiscal year 2019, or take any action relative thereto. Note that this is year 1 of a 3-year contract. Article 20, transfer from receipts reserved for appropriation account, the Borden Colony, the amount of $25,700 to the general fund to offset the associated Borden Colony expenditures of the general operating budget. Any unused funds at the end of fiscal year 2018 to be returned to the Borden Colony receipts reserved for appropriation account or take any action relative thereto. Okay, Article 21 is rather lengthy. It's an article to amend the zoning bylaws by adding a new section, 6.12, entitled Estate Lots. And it's in your warrant. Does anyone want me to read through it, or are there any discussion points at this time? No. Okay. Article 22, amend the Town of Raynham general bylaws by adding a new section, 2/45, marijuana not medically prescribed, as follows, or take any action relative thereto. Again, the text of the amendment is listed in your warrant. Are there any questions? Good. Article 23, to see if the town will vote to amend the Town of Raynham zoning bylaws by adding a new section, 6.13, marijuana not medically prescribed under Article 6 regulations as follows, or take any action relative thereto. Okay. Article 24, accept the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 200A, Section 9A, to provide an alternative procedure for disposing of abandoned funds held in custody of the town, or take any action relative thereto. Article 25, accept the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 33, Section 59, which would allow the town to pay the difference between the base military pay and a town employee's salary if the employee is in the Mass National Guard or Reserve Unit of the U.S. Armed Forces and is called to active duty. Other provisions require no loss of seniority or accrued vacation leave, sick leave, etc., as a result of being called to active duty, or take any action relative thereto. Article 26, accept the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 83, Sections 16A through 16F inclusive, to allow the town to lien unpaid sewer usage charges to serviced properties in other municipalities or take any action relative thereto. Note that the town provides sewage service to a number of households in both the towns of Bridgewater and the city of Taunton, and there's currently no recourse to collect unpaid charges. Yes?
I'd just like to know how this happened, exactly how many households it involves, and for how long this has been going on, and what are the legal issues involved in putting liens on places outside of this town?
I'll defer to the members of the sewer commission that are here.
I'll actually take this question as tax collector, since I'm in charge of taking in the sewer usage.
Mike, step up to the podium, please.
As of this time, there are approximately 60 properties that are serviced by my estimates by the town of Raynham sewer system. Now, in terms of applying a lien to a property under this under this general law, it would be no different than when TMLP, which is a utility of the city of Taunton, applies a lien to properties in the town of Raynham. We would certify that lien with the tax collector in the city of Taunton, who would then place it on the real estate. When that receivable comes in, they will mail us a check accordingly for that amount, and it will be thus applied.
How long has this been going on?
Uh,
How long have these people, these households, whatever, been getting this service and not paying anything?
Really, as of right now, there's only 2 problem properties. One in particular is abandoned, so it's being charged to sewer service, but we haven't been able to collect due to the deceased individual. this general law actually became ratified under the Municipal Modernization Act, which just was passed November. So it's a new law. This is something that tax collectors have been looking at addressing for some time. And now that we have the tools on the books, I am hoping that the town will accept the provisions of this general law so that we can make sure that everyone's on this equal footing moving forward.
Okay. Anyone else?
Just have a question. After this one, I'm looking at 22 and 23, the two marijuana ones.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out how they work. What's the difference between them?
Is there anyone from the planning board?
I believe one is to amend the bylaws, and the other one is to place it in the bylaws under a certain section.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I have a question on the same article. I just got this warrant 5 minutes before this meeting started. It was not in the mail in time, I guess, so I haven't obviously read any of these, but can someone just sum up quickly what we're trying to do with the bylaws associated with marijuana? Basically, I just haven't had time to read it, so.
I did caution town council that this was gonna happen. You're a good guy, so I didn't follow up on it, but I will now. I would recommend the town council in the Monday meeting coming up, the annual, that it be explained in everyday language what this article is going to do if it passes or if it fails. And my feeling has always been that medically, there should be no taxes anyway. I think that's wrong to take anyone who is ill and needs a medical prescription and then have the Commonwealth send somebody on a field trip with it, So I don't think it should be taxed anyway. But this evidently, as I understand it, is not for medical marijuana. As I understand, now if I'm wrong, that's what I want to find out. Because I am not, a personal opinion, I am not personally against medical marijuana, but town vote, police, people I've talked to, my own personal feeling is no on this particular article as I read it, but I want to make sure, as I think everyone does, what is that actually saying? And that's right, Dwayne. In other words,
I just haven't had time to read it.
Dwayne's a pretty good guy, so if he's upset, then we all should be
Well, I'm
upset.
not necessarily upset yet.
Is there anyone from the town that can comment on
Yes,
that?
Mr. Chairman, he has the word. Yes.
I'll be happy to explain it on that
Okay.
evening, but they try to make a distinction between the medical marijuana and other marijuana because the state just voted to approve regular marijuana. Now it's not illegal to have certain amounts of marijuana. So they're trying to make a distinction. I just want to speak with them to make sure that I don't speak for them in any way, not understanding exactly what their intent was in doing this. But I'll explain it that evening and be happy to explain it in detail.
Thank you, Counselor.
You're welcome.
It does appear that they want to just prohibit anything that's not medical.
That would be accurate.
That's the way I read it.
And many other cities and towns have already done that.
Is that something in their rights that the towns can individually choose to do?
Yes. Correct.
Yes.
Anything else on those two articles, 22 and 23? Okay.
But I'll make a comment on
Yes.
that. And obviously, I'll be at the meeting, but I'm interested in the marijuana cultivators and marijuana testing facilities because a lot of them work in both roles, where they're going to cultivate for both medical and recreation, as well as test for THC levels in both. So that could have an impact.
That's clearly an issue.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what the end result is as where it's going to get shipped to. Might be being cultivated under the auspices of being medical marijuana, but then suddenly there's a rush order in a city or town that it's legal to have the marijuana in and they ship it someplace else. And I'm not quite sure how the mechanics work in controlling where the end location is for the marijuana, how that makes a difference.
Okay, we were on Article 27, to amend the Town of Raynham general bylaws by adding a new section to establish and authorize revolving funds for use by certain town departments, boards, committees, agencies, or officers under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44, 53E and 1/2, or take any action relative thereto. So what the article does in the first section is establishes or gives the right to establish revolving funds, and then it establishes 3 separate funds: a hazardous material revolving fund, a fire alarm revolving fund, and a council on aging revolving fund. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, all that does is Article 8 and 9.
Yes, we previously
You
funded,
won't have to put that in there.
okay, good. And the last article is Article 28, to accept 2 parcels of open space known as Assessors Lots 12-242D and 12-229A, being shown on the plan for Russell S. Grabo in open space. And I don't think it describes the location. Yeah, it's just defined in those 2 plans. Such acceptance being subject to conveyance and fee of said land by the owners at no cost to the town, or take any action relative thereto. All right, and then at the back of the warrant are the individual budget items. Did anyone, yes?
Have one comment.
Yes.
Article 28.
Okay,
Just became aware today that that particular property has a safety fence around it, and it was damaged during the winter, and a tree was cut and removed from the fence, but the fence needs to be repaired.
okay.
And I would recommend that possibly that the fence need to be repaired prior to the exchange.
Okay.
We haven't gotten a cost estimate on that at this time.
Okay. Would we amend the article to do that, or would that be?
Not
I'm not
sure.
sure how that works. Okay. Okay,
We can pursue getting a cost estimate as quick as possible.
thanks. Any questions on the budget items at the end of the warrant? Yes.
I have a couple of questions associated with the school budgets.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm asking the right people. It's either the finance committee or probably the selectmen. The incremental costs are operating our junior high school because there are students from Bridgewater there. Are those incremental costs significant? And if they are we being compensated for it, or are we being a nice guy and paying some of Bridgewater's expenses? I think it's probably a question for the selectmen. The second question I have, for many years now, we've been negotiating with Bridgewater to compensate us for our part of the old high school. A couple of years ago, I asked one of the negotiators, and he said, well, there was a problem because obviously the Bridgewater Finance Committee was not interested in compensating us. In fact, I can remember having a meeting with the finance chairman of Bridgewater a few years ago, and he basically stated that. When I talked with one of our negotiators a couple of years ago, he basically said that, well, they were reluctant. I said, well, have we thought about a suit? I feel so sorry that the town of Bridgewater has problems with their middle school. However, I don't think it's the taxpayers of Raynham's responsibility to that school. So can someone up date me at where we are in the negotiations.
Okay.
I think it's been a lot of years. My grandchildren went through the new school, so that it's been certainly too long, in my opinion, and I think action needs to be taken to collect what's rightfully ours.
I'll answer your second question first. I've been told by the Board of Selectmen that the negotiations are still in process and are close to the end, and that's all I know. I suggest you talk.
I was told 2 years
I know, and we've asked similar questions again this year as well. So you can follow up with them afterwards. And getting back to your first question about the Mitchell School, the Raynham Finance Committee did bring that up to the school committee, the Bridgewater Raynham Regional School Committee, and they asked their legal counsel to look into the matter of reimbursing Raynham for the Bridgewater students being housed at the high school. And what the reply is that, in summary, that Raynham has no right to compensation based on the agreement that the districts have in place right now. When there is an incident like this, an emergency or a temporary incident like this, it is allowable per the agreement for the towns to house students in another facility until they can remedy the situation.
Well, no, I realize that being in the district, they had that right, but are there incremental costs being incurred? If there aren't, there's no question. But I would think that probably the maintenance costs and some of those things obviously have fallen on Raynham taxpayers, and I don't agree with it, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Leach. If I could, Mr. Wheeler, the utility costs for the district are factored district-wide, not by school, and the towns are assessed based on the number of students.
I know that. That's what's prompting my question.
Right, so it doesn't really matter where they're located across the district. There's no particular cost, utility cost associated with that. And the students, I think you're referencing the ones at the Raynham Middle School.
Yeah.
That's preschool, Raynham and Bridgewater students. And those types of programs can be located anywhere across the district. They were in Bridgewater. Raynham students were in Bridgewater previously. But the utility costs are factored across the district, and then the towns are assessed based on the number of students. It doesn't go by schools. So whether they're at Raynham Middle, so your answer is basically there's no additional cost.
It's not the utilities I was thinking about. I was thinking about maintenance costs, janitors, regular maintenance. Obviously, if you run more people through, there is an incremental cost. And it's nice that it's a region, which is, I was not happy with, but that's immaterial. I think, I just don't think it's fair. It's a temporary thing, but temporary, from what I read about the middle school, it's a long temporary period. It's not going to be months, it's going to be a couple of years more.
Correct. We're currently involved with MSBA. We're in the eligibility phase right now. The town of Bridgewater is going to go for a feasibility study vote in June. At that point, a feasibility study is voted in. We'll hire a designer and OPM for a project. You're right, Mr. Willard. It's going to be a good 2 to 3 years.
That's why I bring up the question.
But there is going to be a plan in place to relocate those students from the high school to other buildings within Bridgewater. But that's going to take, not next school year, but we're looking for 18-19, so we're looking about one more school year for that to happen. Your question about the regional program, the preschool that's now in the Raynham Middle School, again, as Ms. Riley just stated, it's a regional program that services both Raynham and Bridgewater students, and we have those programs throughout the district. So we have programs that are regional programs in Bridgewater right now that are housing and servicing Raynham students. So we can do that under the regional agreement.
And basically the agreement states basically that the school committee can relocate the students to either of the school facilities?
Based upon an emergency situation, yes, that's how the regional agreement reads.
It's nice to be Santa Claus.
We gotta take care of our kids.
Yes, we do, I agree to that, but we also ought to be compensated for it.
I think what Mr. Alici just talked about with what we got from legal counsel
Right.
states that the way in which that regional agreement's written, that compensation can't go to either side, because we had a situation at the Merrill School a few years ago, and by the grace of God, that roof didn't have, wasn't fully compromised, because those Merrill students may be in a Bridgewater school now. So it can happen on either side of the district. Unfortunately, it happened at the Mitchell, which, was, by the grace of God, again, was over February vacation, and we were able to relocate those students safely to the high school, and the Merrill, the Mitchell, other students went to the old high school, which was the current middle school, and we did put the preschool program over at Raynham Middle.
Well, I think what you did was good. Obviously, the students are the most important here. I was just concerned if we were being Santa Claus, and I didn't think that was in the intent of the agreements. And maybe it's insignificant. If it's insignificant, who cares? I just didn't know. So that's what I was asking. Has anyone an idea of how much the Raynham taxpayers are compensating the town of Bridgewater? Do we have any idea? Is it 10,000? Is it 100,000?
I don't know how you're quantifying that, Mr. Wheeler, in terms of what?
There's no real additional cost.
Basically, just incremental costs. What is the incremental cost for that move?
Based upon what? Based upon what factors, I guess, is what I'm asking. Because as Ms. Riley said, we view it as a region, and we are paying for those services as a region, not individual sites.
I understand and appreciate.
And if those students were at another site, we'd still have the same amount of monies we'd be paying to service those students and those incremental costs. It just happens to be they're housed at other buildings now. So it's not an additional cost to the town of Raynham.
Well, I think you understand my question. Clearly, I think we have no choice but to abide by the agreement. But eventually, I would like someone to review that agreement when we all get whole again.
Well, actually, before that, hopefully, Mr. Wheeler, because we have reactivated our regionalization study committee on the school committee so that we can look at clarifying some issues. So we are going forward with that.
I personally think the school committee does a wonderful job, and I thank you all for what you do. That's my only question.
Okay. Are there any other questions related to any of the articles or the budget? Mr. McKinney?
I just had old days. I always have one. I had just one more. Is that stabilization fund still approximately 2.7 million?
Yes, and we're going to...
I see we've got another 800,000 that probably at the November town meeting, that'll probably be moved into some stabilization funds.
And right now, we're adding, at the special town meeting, prior to the annual town meeting, we're going to add $100,000 to that 2.7 million. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, this is relating to the school, and it isn't particularly related to an article, but this is as close as open forum as we're ever going to get. So I think it's a good evening to do it. I would address, therefore, the Finance Committee, Town Council, I keep bringing you up, Selectmen, and the school committee. And my request would be this. The people that originally regionalized in 1950 or whatever, they had all they can do to organize it. So I'm not blaming anybody. But I am saying that we now know how much of a pain these two towns have gone through to get this thing resolved now. and it still isn't resolved. And Dwayne's absolutely correct. It isn't resolved yet. And the chairman of the school committee is correct. They're going to have a committee, and they're going to resolve that part of the thing. But what excuse have we got in this year, 50 years from now, to leave to the people that come along and see if they got the same pain that we got now? Why should the people 50 years from now have the problem that we have now? Point is this: a committee should be formed with interested parties, that there be a buyout agreement for the new Bridgewater Raynham High School, because it is stated basically that schools have about a 50-year life. And so therefore, 50 years from now, when we have the buyout aspect of it, we won't go through what we've gone through. I am not sure, and nobody probably, you probably haven't been here when it began, how many times, and Gordon, you may remember, how many meetings we've gone, how many committees we've gone through for the buyout of the old Bridgewater Raynham High School that is now the middle. I'm going to say at least 4, Gordon?
3 anyway.
3 committees anyway, and over a decade. And yet, today, we still don't have that agreement. And I'm saying is, we should get a committee when, as long as this, we're still calling it the new Bridgewater Raynham High School, there should be a committee of interested parties, and they should list it so that when this time comes, they won't go through what we're going through. That's all I'm saying, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to invade your turf here, because this meeting got over fairly early. If it wasn't for Dwayne and I, you'd be home. That's what I hear.
Is that why we're... Okay, I just want to remind everyone that next Monday, May 15th, there's a special town meeting at 6:45 p.m., immediately followed by the annual town meeting at 7 p.m., and this is at the Raynham Middle School. Any further questions or comments? I think it's 75. 25? Wow.
I thought it was 15.
Wow.
And we're going to get clarification next Monday on the marijuana?
Yeah.
Okay. When? Next Monday?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. No, I don't believe we do. All right. Thank you, everyone. See you next Monday. Thank you.